Hello, everybody, and welcome to a news update from the Extra Shift. I'm Chris, here as always, without Brendan because he's, currently running around Korea. And he picked a great time to decide to go overseas because we had something we don't normally have. We haven't had for a very long time. I was trying to work out what I think the last massive sort of blockbuster trade that you've seen in the NHL is. You've got to go back a few years, I think, before you get anywhere near a blockbuster trade. This is probably as close as we've been. This is definitely a blockbuster. Obviously, we're talking about the big trade that's happened today. JT Miller's gone nowhere yet. Still, because who knows? Instead, while we're all sitting there and waiting for a JT Miller trade to the Rangers or the Rangers to trade somebody, probably in all likelihood, we end up with one that sort of came out of nowhere, really. So let's sort of get into it. So what we're looking at is the 3-team trade, obviously. Now, I mentioned 3-team trade. I think the way I've put it is that the Chicago Blackhawks stand at the side and watch the trade take place and wave for the participants in the trade. They play a valuable part in terms of the money that they retain on Rantanen, but let's get into it. So the Carolina Hurricanes acquire Mikko Rantanen, Taylor Hall, and Nils Ljungtrup. This is probably the last we're going to talk about Nils Ljungtrup. He's playing in second or third division Swedish hockey at the moment. Don't think that's going to be much of anything, personally. The Colorado Avalanche acquire Marty Netchus, Jack Drury, a 2025 second and a 2026 fourth. And the Chicago Blackhawks get a third rounder for retaining 50% on Mikko Rantanen, who passed through on the way out. So in terms of a trade, it's an interesting setup for the trade because you've got obviously the big piece here, and I'll go through the stats and we'll break them down in a minute. The big piece here is obviously Mikko Rantanen. Rantanen is in the last couple of seasons, over a 100-point player. Rantanen is not just great at assisting and not just great at setting up. He will score you goals as well. He's been an absolute cornerstone of that Avs franchise. Marty Netchus has been obviously started the year as one of the hottest players in the league. He was absolutely on a tear initially. He's still absolutely excellent and is performing at a very high level. Is probably going to have his best overall year, was on course for that at the moment. And then you've sort of got Jack Drury, who's guy. He really is. He just he sits around a little bit. His numbers aren't brilliant, but his numbers aren't horrible either. And Taylor Hall, who, has name value and obviously is a former winner of the Hart. We all remember that year. But by the same token, that name value versus what he's actually putting out on the ice, kind of a different story. And I'm really interested by a couple of parts of this trade. Let me know in the comments, by the way, while we're doing this, what you think of the trade, questions on the trade, what you would have done if you are a fan of any of these teams. If you're a Chicago fan, if you happen to be a Chicago fan, do you like the fact that for giving up Taylor Hall and retaining 50% on Mikko Rantanen, you got a third? Who knows? Let's get into this. So let's have a look at what we're looking at, and we're looking at the details. Let's start with Mikko Rantanen. Obviously, the biggest piece of this puzzle. So Mikko Rantanen is on 925. Obviously, the contract is coming up. That's a key part of this, and we'll get into that shortly. But Rantanen in the last couple of seasons, as I said before, 105 and 104 points respectively, 92 the year before that in 75. So he would have again broken the 100-point barrier. And if you look at his points in his return, his goal scoring, he's got 25 this year at the moment. If you look at his goal scoring under this contract, if Fanny played 42 games in 2019, 2020, and 2020, 21, obviously 52. COVID seasons, you can't take any of those numbers into massive sort of, figuring. However, in 2021, he still in 52 games still has 30 goals and 36 assists. 2021, 2022, in 75, he has 36 goals, then 55 goals, 42 goals, 25 this year with 39 assists. He's 64 points in 49 games. He's absolutely flying again. So this is a proven star. Like if you go through the NHL stats at the moment, and if you look at the stats to work out, who's sitting where, I think Rantanen is currently sitting, I think he's somewhere, I haven't looked it up since before, but I think it was something like fifth or sixth in scoring in the league at the moment. So he's not playing badly at all. He's having an absolutely brilliant season again. So the question then gets asked, well, why did the Avalanche do this? Now, the suggestion that seems to be the most prominent among insiders is to do with contract. And the situation, the cap situation with Colorado is going to be tricky. I think because if you look at the situation around Colorado, they've got, they're fairly tight to the cap this year. They do have some LTIR pool available to them as well. So that LTIR gives them about 5.5 mil. So they've got about 5 mil up their sleeves. Even points out in the comments, Colorado must have something else bubbling along because he believes the trade makes them 100% worse in the short term. Let's put that up on the screen. Either another trade or Landeskog coming back. That's, in my summary at the end of this, one of the things that I've talked about. There's basically what is indicated is that if they send like a couple of players down, Landeskog can come off LTIR. So this could very well be a move with the idea of Gabriel Landeskog comes off LTIR down the line, and they're going to need that cap space. And for them, I think the situation is that if you've got Mikko Rantanen and you're not going to be able to extend him at a number that you are comfortable with, and that's the other conversation they've got to have. Because next season at the moment, when you go through and look at the cap numbers in terms of what they've got to spend, what percentage of cap they've got to spend at the moment, they've got a lot of players that they've got to re-sign. And they've got a lot of players they've got to re-sign in terms of the Drouin, whatever they're going to do with that Jonathan Drouin deal. They've really got to revitalize what's under the top four. Killington comes up as well. Goaltenders, they've got those sorted down. That's all fine. But I kind of look at what they've got and think that they probably do want to make some more moves, but a lot of that's also going to depend on what happens with Landeskog. So Landeskog coming back off LTIR, I think, is probably the most likely outcome of this. And I think what you get if you are Carolina is something that you've been crying out for. Like Carolina get to the postseason, they get to the playoffs, they look really good going in. The defense looks great. They look solid. They get to the playoffs and they can't score. Like they just can't score their way through series. And so what you end up with, I think, with Carolina, and one of the reasons why they make this move is that Carolina make the move because they look at those numbers and go, well, we need that scoring. I haven't included his playoff points. He's fine in the playoffs. He's good in the playoffs. Like Mikko Rantanen is a very, very, very top-level player in the NHL. If I'm Carolina, I make this bet. For Colorado, again, I think this comes down to Gabe Landeskog and what they're looking at with Gabe Landeskog, and is he going to come back or not? I would suggest this means yes. If he doesn't, though, they've got $5 million in LTIR they can use at the deadline. So that's the other point to this. Now let's have a look at Marty Netjes. So I don't think this is a bad move. But I don't think this is a bad move for Colorado. Obviously, I would rather have I would rather have the player or not, right? If I have to make the choice, I'm probably not making the trade. But if you make the decision that you are going to make that trade, and they clearly made the decision that they needed to make the move, and they needed to go out and get a scorer, they needed to get someone like Mikko Rantanen, right? You make that decision that you need to go out and get Mikko Rantanen, Netjes is going to come back. But if you make the decision as Colorado that you need to move on from him because you can't get him under a cap hit that you're comfortable with, Marty Netjes, like if you look at his points in the last couple of seasons, like 82 games, he got 71 points. Then in 77, he got 53, bit of a drop off. But in this season already, 49 games played, 55 points. I think last season's the anomaly. And I think that Netchus is going to be probably around that 70-odd point mark. So I look at this trade and I think to myself, this is them looking at the future. He's cap controlled for another 12 months, $6 million on the contract, so 6.5. So 6.5 for 12 more months. That's much more palatable for the Avalanche and gives them 12 months to go out and use that cap space to get somebody else as well. So that helps. I think if you are the Avs, I think you get that out of there as well. And again, you're taking a bet on a younger player. Like we all, love Landeskog. Obviously, is going to be. Landeskog's obviously fantastic. If you look at Landeskog being fantastic, but sort of hitting the end a little bit, and we don't know what he's going to come back like in injury form, take the punt on Netchus. And I think him playing alongside the best center he's going to have ever played with in Nathan McKinnon probably gets him more points. So I don't mind this move, obviously, for the Avalanche. Again, I think that they're losing the better player, but Netchus possibly has upside and longevity. And again, is more cap controlled, and they can probably get him under a better deal than. I don't know what Rantanen was going to request, but I'm fairly certain that it would have been north of 11. I wouldn't be shocked if he was up trying to ask for McKinnon money. That's sort of the story that's come out, and that's obviously going to be put out by the Avs to try to justify it, is that he was after McKinnon money. But even if he's after McKinnon money, the man scores 100 points a season. It's not an unfair ask. It's not an unfair ask. The third part of this is good old Taylor Hall. Good old Taylor Hall. Now Taylor Hall has, that one season with the Devs is very much the anomaly. Like that MVP season where 93 points, that is hugely the anomaly. I mean, he's moved to Boston. He got 61 points, which was a great season again. And a couple of seasons with the Oilers where, like one season with the Oilers of 80 and one season with the Oilers of 65. But it's feast or famine when it comes to Taylor Hall. And I think that depth role player is, I think, what you're getting when you make that trade. So I think when you make that move with Taylor Hall, you're not trying to sign name Taylor Hall. What you're trying to sign is obviously depth player, experienced veteran Taylor Hall. So I think Carolina, I think that Taylor Hall as part of this move shows me that Carolina are terrified about their playoff scoring. And they're just looking for people that can score. Like what they've done in their eyes is they've replaced one person who can score goals in the playoffs with two players who can score goals in the playoffs, one of whom can score at an elite level. So I think if you're trying to work out why teams do this deal, if you're Carolina, first of all, you do it because it's Mikko Rantanen. But secondly, you get two players who can score, give you that depth, whereas, you've got Netchus who's scoring well, but, he's one player. Again, the move for the Avalanche, I think, has to be cap related. Speaking of cap related, the Chicago Blackhawks. Now, I haven't really spoken about the Blackhawks in this trade because they as I said, they are pivotal to it, and yet they are completely on the side. A little bit about what he just says, talks about who wins the trade. The who wins the trade. Well, if you're Colorado, as I said, you had a player at the start of the season who was at the start of the season the hottest in the league, good cap for 12 months, plays next to Nathan McKinnon, gives you the moves to either go out and get people or get Gabe Landeskog off LTIR. I think the focus is getting Gabe Landeskog off LTIR by the playoffs. Now, before the playoffs, obviously, because remember, cap space doesn't count when you're in playoffs. Carolina, you get one of the best players in the league, breaks 100 points. You've also got the first shot at an extension. There was apparently no extension as part of this, but they get first dibs. So Carolina have the first chance to extend. And again, they get a vet in Taylor Hall who can give them some quality and depth in the lineup. So I can see from both those teams. The Chicago Blackhawks, I don't understand. And my rationale is not that I don't understand in terms of, like, they basically got a third for taking the 50% of Rantanen. But then they also got rid of the Taylor Hall cap hit. But you don't need to get rid of that Taylor Hall cap hit if you're Chicago, because you had cap space and you weren't using it on anything. So why they didn't get more out of this, I don't quite know. There aren't a lot of teams that could have acted as the go-between. So one of the things that I think is quite interesting going into this trade deadline, and remember, CJ and stuff like that have talked about the fact there are two trade deadlines here. There's the real trade deadline, and then there's the Four Nations trade deadline. And I think people are trying to get their moves done before that. Like, Carolina have the cap space to do something like this. The Flames have the cap space. The Ducks have the cap space. Once you start getting into Preds and Sabres and Utah and stuff like that, they don't really have the ability to make this happen. There's going to be a lot more players that need to go out the door. But I would have looked at this, like, if I'm looking at this as Colorado or Carolina, like, if I'm looking for someone as a make weight here, I would have been looking at one of the other clubs, because I think there are probably players you could get out of those clubs that might give you more than Taylor Hall will. And that's part of it for me too, is that I feel like if they are set on using the Blackhawks as the way to make this money work, surely if they're set on using the Blackhawks to make this money work, the Blackhawks can request and get more than the third. Because in reality, they get the third for a player and taking a cap hit. You should get more than that. And I know it's Taylor Hall, but you should get more than that. So picks are nice, and a third, great, fantastic, but I don't think it's the best weaponizing of cap space that a team that's down the bottom can do. Because what this now does is they actually, they take on that little bit of cap space. They do actually come down a little bit in cap as well, because Taylor Hall was on $6 million. Retaining gives them $1 million back. But you could have weaponized that space and got a lot more back in return. So I think that for Chicago, I think Kyle Davidson possibly didn't hold out for enough. I don't think they would have used one of the other teams, like the Ducks as a make weight. Like, I don't think they would have used one of those teams. Now, look, doesn't really matter in terms of how long that money's on the books for, because, Rantanen's due his extension. So once the extension happens, that goes away. So it's not going to hurt anybody. And again, it's not going to hurt nothing. None of this is going to hurt the Blackhawks anyway, because, like, what are they using cap for? They're not. It is moments like this where I am disappointed the Sharks have used all their retention spots, because for me personally, I look at that as a Sharks fan and go, you should have been in on that. You could have been in on that quite nicely. But, I think there were opportunities there for other teams to get themselves involved and make this an even bigger trade. But this is still a massive, massive move. So if you go back and have a look at it, I think the question mark over this, as I said, the question is who wins this trade? Now, as I said, Jack Drury exists, is guy, is player. Nils Ljungtrup is said playing in low division Swedish hockey. Don't worry about that. The 2025 second and the 2026 fourth for Colorado, I feel like they'll be used as make weights in trade deals, because a 2025 second for Carolina is not going to be high. Like, in terms of, it's not going to be in the top 10 or top 20 of those. It's going to be in the last 10 picks of the second round. So you're probably trading that, and you're probably firing that 2026 fourth off as well. I don't know. I feel like Carolina, for me, win the trade. They get the best player. I don't think it's as big a wipeout for Colorado as people think, and I think that has more to do with the upside of Netchus, and secondly, I think this means that Landeskog is coming off LTIR. So I think that's a win for them. As long as he comes back and is fit, that's a win for them. And they've got that 2025 second they can use at the deadline for more trading, and I think they will. I think what we've seen from the Avalanche in the last few weeks is I don't think the Avalanche will be sitting still. I think the Avs will be trading, and I think the Avs will be trading again. And, I don't know what they're going to go out and get next, but I think the Avs are not finished with their moves yet. But again, I personally feel like, for me, the Hurricanes win the trade, but I don't think the Avs lose, if that makes sense. I think that they are slightly worse now, but with the potential and upside down the line to sort of find themselves back to where they should be and back to where they were before the trade with a little bit more cap space. That's my read on it. Anyway, we're going to leave that there. Let us know what you think in the comments. Let us know what you think. Again, if you're here on YouTube and watching us on YouTube, please leave comments. Please leave likes. Obviously, Brendan will be back in the near future to make this more than just a one-man monologue. Also, we'll have hopefully a couple more guests to do the news update in the actual normal podcast in the next week or so. So keep tuned for that. But please let people know if you like it. Please give us the comments if you're in the Australian NHL Facebook page as well. Please give us comments on there too. We really like to hear back from you. Until then, I've been Chris, and we will catch you all later.